Sigmund Freud observed that consciousness too easily succumbs to unconscious influences, which are often more truthful and wiser than our conscious thoughts. Furthermore, unconscious motives frequently override our conscious decisions, especially in matters of vital importance. Many people tend to undermine their own agendas to their frustration and bewilderment. They find themselves making irrational decisions, experiencing mental blocks, and even suffering physical ailments that paralyze their plans. It's as if a mysterious force takes control, moving them away from the goals they have set out to achieve. Thus, plagued by continuous self-sabotage, these people never seem to reach where they want to be. But why do we self-sabotage? Do we ruin our own plans without any apparent reason? Sigmund Freud discovered plausible answers to these questions when he became aware of a part of the psyche he called the unconscious. The unconscious can be viewed as a psychological reservoir within the realm of the mind. In this dark place, where the light of our conscious awareness does not reach, we store our undesirable traits. There may be several reasons why we hide certain unwanted aspects of ourselves. Our parents might not approve of them. They might not conform to social ideals, or life has taught us that they lead to suffering. We repress these traits by banishing them to the depths of the psyche, as if they were not part of us. But they are part of us. And according to Freud, repressing unwanted aspects of ourselves will not solve the problem. In fact, it can have disastrous consequences, as these aspects acquire a life of their own, operating in darkness. This is where self-sabotage begins. The repressed parts of our personality rebel against our conscious minds from the depths of the unconscious. We are at war with ourselves without even knowing who we are fighting against. Fortunately, there are ways to stop this self-sabotage. Instead of repressing what's in the unconscious, Freud urged us to bring it into our conscious awareness. We can only do this by making the unconscious conscious and discovering what hides beneath. Let's explore the psychology of self-sabotage and how to overcome it based on Freud's work. There's a common misunderstanding about the unconscious that leads to much confusion about its role and how to integrate what has been repressed. Often it is thought that the unconscious is simply the dark and negative side of the personality. Due to the problems it can cause, it is often thought of as the part of us that harbors all our negative impulses. And because of this, the unconscious as a psychological concept is often symbolically represented as a shadowy figure, suggesting an ominous other self that exists outside our consciousness. But the unconscious refers to something fundamentally different. The unconscious is more like a dark place than a dark and shadowy figure. We might think of the unconscious as a dark closet in the human psyche where the light of consciousness does not shine. This dark closet is where we lock away all the repressed parts of the personality that we are unwilling and unable to face or reintegrate at the moment, which can happen for various reasons such as trauma or unmet needs. So when we talk about integrating repressed content, we are not integrating the unconscious itself. We are integrating the contents of the unconscious. When I say the contents of the unconscious, I'm referring to all the repressed parts of the personality. These are the parts of the self that inhabit the dark place that is the unconscious. Just as you might put objects in a dark closet and they become enveloped in darkness, you could also take those same objects out of that dark closet and bring them into the sunlight, and they would no longer be enveloped in darkness. This is also true for the parts of the personality that inhabit the unconscious. There is nothing inherently dark or negative about them. It's simply that they have been placed in a dark place and are operating outside our conscious awareness, often causing problems for us due to this disconnection. An important thing to realize here is that when these parts of the personality are repressed, it's not as if you simply have some repressed traits. It wouldn't be entirely accurate to say something like repressing my greed or repressing my joy, because both greed and joy are floating qualities. To repress a quality like greed, joy, or anything else, you would have to repress a complete fragment of personality that is associated with those qualities. These fragments of personality that break away from conscious awareness, which Freud would attribute to the ID or repressed elements of the ego, are actually more like mini personalities. Each of these mini personalities is 100% you because they are fragments of your personality. When these mini personalities break away from your conscious awareness and are placed in the dark closet of the unconscious, they become separate and autonomous from your conscious personality, which is the ego, the part of yourself that is in the light of consciousness to which you refer as I. So just as our conscious personality, or ego, has its own perspectives, needs, and agendas, each of our unconscious aspects also has its own perspectives, needs, and agendas. The agendas of any given unconscious aspect may or may not conflict with the agendas of our conscious personality. When the agenda of your conscious personality clashes with the agenda of one or more of your unconscious aspects, this can cause quite a bit of internal turmoil and a sense of resistance or struggling with yourself. You can notice your unconscious aspects and their agendas in action when you engage in procrastination and self-sabotaging behavior that prevents you from making positive changes in your life. Let's discuss an example of how unconscious-based self-sabotage can manifest in someone's life and hinder their plans. Suppose a man strongly identifies with being solitary. His goal is to run a successful online business and live in the countryside because that lifestyle minimizes interaction with and dependence on other people, which he consciously believes is what he ultimately wants. Although the idea of self-sufficiency is workable, he repeatedly undermines the progress he makes. For example, he is offered the opportunity to purchase a piece of land in nature at a friendly price, but he rejects it for a flimsy reason. Or he manages to attract a considerable number of followers to his lifestyle blog, which has great earnings potential. Yet he decides to stop posting, unable to explain his decision with solid arguments. From the perspective of the ego, the way he consciously perceives himself and determines what he wants and needs, his choices make no sense. After all, he strongly identifies as the solitary Batman, has dreamed for years of being self-sufficient, independent, and away from the herd. But as soon as his dreams become reality, he throws an obstacle in the path. He cannot explain why. It's as if something or someone is sabotaging him, as if an unwanted guest is hiding in the shadows of his soul, unsupervised, outside his conscious identity. And as this person quickly takes control without consultation, it destroys what the ego's efforts have achieved, and then leaves without a trace, just like any form of solid reasoning to support his self-sabotage. The mysterious guest remains elusive. He knows something strange is happening in the darkness, but he cannot point to it since it is beyond his conscious reach. And as long as he fails to illuminate what lurks in the unconscious, it will rule him like a puppeteer from behind the curtain. As Freud would assert, any autonomous complex not subject to conscious will exert a possessive effect on consciousness proportional to its strength and limits the latter's freedom. When our unconscious aspects take the reins, destructive consequences can arise. Unexplainable desires and emotions can emerge from nowhere, and when they please, without permission, overriding our authority and diminishing our willpower. They influence, sabotage our conscious agendas while pulling the strings from behind the scenes, leaving us perplexed at our irrational behavior. The repressed complex or mini personality hiding in the man's unconscious represents a repressed characteristic, the desire for human connection. Due to past wounds, he had dispossessed it and is not aware that this unwanted aspect of himself has become a shadow government, trying to undermine the actions of a fearful isolationist disguised as a lover of solitude and independence, but who unknowingly deeply yearns for companionship from the depths of his psyche. This repressed personality plays a paradoxical game. On one hand, this unconscious aspect wants to be part of his conscious awareness. It wants its motivations to be heard, its desires to be felt, its needs to be met. So it sabotages the firm individualism of the conscious personality and all its efforts toward independence. Consequently, he lives with roommates and washes his clothes at a public laundromat where he sees many people. This situation may seem inconvenient and unwanted from the perspective of his conscious personality, but it is precisely where the unconscious aspect wants him to be. On the other hand, the unconscious aspect does not want to be illuminated, and its evasion is understandable, since it not only represents the unwanted, but also rebels against the person who dispossessed it. If found, it will lose its sovereignty. So as long as it remains in the shadows, it maintains the power to troll, sabotage, and destroy autonomously. It remains a personality of its own, and above all, secure. But in doing so, it will be in perpetual conflict with its host. There are several different reasons why self-sabotage can occur, but in the man's example, the self-sabotage comes from an unconscious aspect that is responding to a need that might go unmet, the need for connection. From the perspective of this unconscious aspect, the conscious personality's agenda of moving toward extreme independence is totally antithetical to that need. Deep down, this mini-personality knows that when its host achieves financial success, he will have enough money to have his own house without roommates and will have his own vehicle. He will have his own washer and dryer, so he will no longer go to the laundromat where he has a lot of social interaction. The unconscious aspect also realizes that having more money means he has more ability to neglect and ignore his need for connection and socialization. And so, in a desperate attempt to preserve the scant connection with other people that this unconscious aspect receives, it sabotages his financial success and manipulates the conscious personality to avoid financial success by making inexplicably unwise business decisions. Additionally, it might also create different rationalizations and mental blocks about success, and perhaps each time he wants to work on his blog, he suddenly feels overwhelmingly tired and just wants to take a nap when before he was perfectly energized and awake. Now, the solution for self-sabotage that comes from an unconscious aspect with an unmet need is quite straightforward. The first step is to recognize the needs and agendas of both your conscious personality and the needs of each of your unconscious aspects. And this requires observation and brutal honesty. If this man in the example is very honest with himself, there will be many clues throughout the day that he actually values connection and a sense of belonging. He just has to be willing to notice these things and admit them to himself. Then, once he realizes this need, it is his role as the conscious personality to weave this need of the unconscious aspect into the conscious personality's agenda for financial success and make the necessary changes to meet that need. Instead of envisioning himself becoming totally independent when he achieved financial success, he can envision having more time and freedom due to the money he earns, and using that time and freedom to socialize and connect with friends and loved ones. The solution would be to meet the needs of the unconscious aspect. In this way, the unconscious aspect doesn't have to sabotage the goals and dreams of the conscious personality to ensure those needs are met. As we learned from Freud, be aware of your unconscious so that you are not ruled by its domain.